Like most of our Hashimoto's related symptoms, one problem can often compound and contribute to another. And although symptoms like anxiety have many different causes, if we start to look at the function of the rest of our brain and our thyroid, then we can get a clear understanding for what parts of our body we need to support and therefore see improvements in these symptoms. So in today's video, we're going to look at how Hashimoto's can lead to changes in physiology in other parts of our body, why thyroid problems in particular can lead to brain symptoms like anxiety and dizziness, and different strategies that we can use to help you function better. Hey guys, my name is Dr. Bodle, and welcome back to my channel where I make videos to help you better understand your Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. That way you can use natural strategies like nutrition, lifestyle, and supplemental changes to boost your energy, help you lose weight, reduce your symptoms, and get back to living the life that you deserve. In practice, I've helped thousands of patients, and I hope that the teaching and information that I've provided to them will also benefit you. If you've been enjoying the content, please remember to click on the like button for this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you're notified when I post videos on Thursday mornings. So as we get started today, one of the big keys of Hashimoto's is looking at all the different parts of our physiology that it interacts with. If you've watched my videos before, you know that changes in thyroid function, either low thyroid hormone or changes in the way that we use thyroid hormone, can affect just about any part of the body because thyroid hormone helps to set the metabolism for all of our cells. Every cell has a job to do, and therefore it needs thyroid hormone to be able to do that job. However, depending on who you are as a person, your health history, your habits, your genetics, Hashimoto's is going to impact each one of us slightly differently. And it's these differences that allows us to identify what our own particular immune triggers are and the associated areas that are involved. This then allows us to create a plan to target and support these particular areas. That way we can generate the best possible outcomes. So what you'll start to notice, and this might be something that you already recognize, but Hashimoto's is never just one thing. It's never just thyroid symptoms. Yes, of course, we're always going to have some of those classic thyroid issues, but they'll also be paired with other types of symptoms. So for example, when you experience a flare-up, it's probably not going to just be fatigue. It'll probably be fatigue with something like bloating and digestive discomfort. Or maybe it's an increase in joint pain, weight gain, and brain fog. Or even something like an increase in dizziness and anxiety. The point here is, again, Hashimoto's is going to influence multiple parts of our body, and we want to make sure that everything is being assessed. If we don't assess things properly, then it's possible that we could miss a key trigger, and therefore it can limit our healing outcomes. But why then does Hashimoto's and thyroid problems play such a big role in the way that our brain works? Well, as we already touched on, the parts of our body that tend to be most metabolically active often will suffer first because they're most sensitive to these changes. And when it comes to being metabolically active and having a huge demand for energy, few parts of our body are as active as our brain. However, there are parts of our brain that have an even more intimate connection to our thyroid, especially when we're dealing with Hashimoto's, and that includes our cerebellum. Our cerebellum is a small portion of the brain that sits right underneath our cortex on the back side of the head, right next to our brainstem. And it can be injured by things like head injuries, stroke, degenerative processes from alcohol and drug use, autoimmune processes that are specific for the neurological tissue in our cerebellum, and also inflammatory and cross-reactive damage from Hashimoto's. Because the function of the cerebellum is to regulate coordination and movement, it's heavily involved in learning, eye movements and reflexes, coordination of the limbs, vestibular activity, and spinal stability. And if our cerebellum becomes damaged, then we lose the ability to regulate these areas. This can commonly lead to symptoms like vertigo and dizziness, clumsiness, uncoordinated movements, and poor balance, nausea associated with trivial movements either of yourself or of the environment around you. And it's not unusual for people to experience an uptick in symptoms when they're in a crowded area, moving past large shelves in a grocery store, or they're in a moving vehicle. And finally, we can have changes in spinal stability, which can lead to joint and back pain that isn't necessarily related to a previous injury, or can come on when those core muscle groups are engaged. Think of things like vacuuming, sweeping, or even that slight bend forward that you might do when you're washing dishes. But the key here is recognizing if you have thyroid symptoms and identifying whether or not there's overlap with any of these potential cerebellar symptoms. Because Hashimoto's can put us at greater risk of cerebellar degeneration, and our cerebellum is responsible for integrating and modulating all of these movement and coordination inputs, when we don't do that properly, not only can we have cerebellar symptoms, but it can also lead to stress and anxiety as well. This is because our cerebellum has an intricate mechanism that essentially gates the information that's provided to the rest of the brain. If it's something important and urgent, like we're falling off our bike, then it's definitely going to let the rest of the brain know. But if it's something simple like turning our head or riding in the car, yeah, it'll inform everyone else, but it's not as urgent and it's not an emergency. But when this gating mechanism or regulatory step starts to break down, trivial inputs can actually start to cause an excessive response. This can cause the brain to start thinking that everything is an emergency, leading to the loss of function because there's an upregulation of our stress and anxiety pathways. So just like I said before, when we have changes in cerebellar function, we can also have changes in our balance, in our response to crowds and the movement of people, and our response to riding in a car. And in an ideal world, none of these should be anxiety-inducing. But because of this connection between thyroid and cerebellar problems, it quickly can be. In addition to our cerebellum communicating with the conscious part of our brain, it also has direct connections to our midbrain, or our mesencephalon, which is the neurological seat for our fight or flight response. Because the job of this part of our brainstem is to respond to different physiological stressors, it has an increased amount of receptors that respond to inflammatory cytokines because it wants to know when something is going wrong. Now, if we have a chronic inflammatory condition like Hashimoto's, then it's likely that our midbrain or mesencephalon is more primed, or it has a heightened level of activity. If you've primed that area and it's already kind of ready to go, what do you think is going to happen if there's a cerebellar stimulus, which, because your cerebellar is damaged, it can no longer gate properly? Well, any sort of thyroid changes or immune flare-up is then going to lead to a decrease in brain and cerebellar function, which is then going to very quickly and rapidly kick off an autonomic stress response, which will do things like increase our heart rate, increase our breathing, increase our sweating, and also increase our anxiety. Additionally, because our mesencephalon's job is to not only recognize a stressful situation, but get us out of that stressful situation, people often notice symptoms like increased sensitivity to light, increased sensitivity to sound, irritability in general, and increased sensitivity to pain, all of which are evolutionary adaptations which are designed to help us survive in that particular moment. To make matters worse, when we have this kind of a stress response and we see that increase in heart rate and breathing, it also increases our metabolism and burns off most of our freely available glucose. If you've watched some of my other videos, you also probably know that thyroid problems can lead to glucose dysregulation. And a lot of people can struggle to stabilize their fuel levels during the day as well as while they're sleeping. So if we're already having problems with our fuel and this stress response is consuming the little fuel that we have remaining, then this places an additional stressor on our immune system and our cerebellum. This can put us into a vicious cycle where stress starts to perpetuate stress. And there's rarely a time where you're without some sort of thyroid symptomatology, brain or cerebellar symptomatology, and it's frequent that you're experiencing anxiety on top of it. So how do we help with these symptoms? Well, it's important that we address both the Hashimoto's and the cerebellar changes at the same time, because as I just said, they tend to feed on one another. Obviously, managing autoimmunity is a huge topic, so I'll link for you one of my videos that focuses on that much more specifically. However, to put it very simply, it's all about identifying triggers and managing the damage that had previously occurred. When I'm working with patients, some of the areas that I want to make sure are thoroughly assessed include things like food reactions and sensitivities, an inflammatory diet in general, emotional stress, poor sleep, overtraining, glucose fluctuations and metabolic disease, gut pathology, infections, exposure to chemicals and environmental toxins, and changes in sex hormone function. Now, obviously, that's a huge list and it can be hard for people to know where to start. But that's why we want to go through the exact same process that we did in today's video. You want to track all of your symptoms, identify when they started, what makes them better or worse, and start to form a list of most likely culprits. Usually, there will be more than one contributing factor, but take the things that have the biggest impact on your health and function and try to address those first. So if you notice that your brain doesn't work as well and you feel more anxious when you eat certain foods, then you'll want to remove those foods from your diet. But if your brain function is very much tied into your sleep patterns, then that might become your top priority. And of course, your strategies and approaches will change and shift over time as you improve and your symptoms change and shift over time. So don't get stressed about trying to find that one perfect way or approach or thing that you need to do, and realize that your response needs to be dynamic. When it comes to your cerebellar health, it's also about identifying triggers. And for some people, the main trigger could be the change in thyroid health, and addressing that helps you to improve in both areas. However, you'll also want to look at some of the things that we talked about earlier today. Manage inflammation, reduce drugs and alcohol, and assess if you've had any previous brain injuries. Aside from reducing triggers, one of the best ways that we can help our cerebellum to heal is by stimulating it in a way that is well tolerated. So you want to avoid those big events that can cause anxiety for you, again, being in crowds, maybe being in a moving vehicle, and in the meantime, doing things like regular exercise, core stability exercises, balance exercises, and gaze stability exercises can all be great ways to integrate and activate different parts of our cerebellum in a way that is healthy and supportive. Remember that if you've watched any of my videos on exercise, we don't want to overdo it. And if you find that you're doing some sort of activity that is causing you to become more symptomatic afterwards, then you'll want to reduce the intensity and the duration of that exercise until it can be completed without any exacerbation of symptoms or loss of function. If we can create a plan that addresses all of these areas in a supportive way, then not only should we see an improvement in those traditional thyroid symptoms, but we'll also see less dizziness, better balance, better coordination, less reactivity to movement of ourselves and the environment, and when all of that's attended to, we'll also have less anxiety. But as I said at the beginning of the video, there's a lot of different causes for anxiety, and this is only one of them. However, because of the relationship between our thyroid, immune system, and our brain, it is a frequent cause for anxiety for people with Hashimoto's. And even though the mechanism is relatively complex, I hope today's video was informative and helped those of you who are experiencing some of these symptoms. If you have any questions, be sure to drop them for me in the comments below and let me know if there's anything that I can clarify for you. If you liked today's video but feel like you need more help connecting your thyroid symptoms to your anxiety and are interested in working with me one-on-one, then send me an email at contact@seattlethyroidhelp.com and put consultation in the headline. From there, my staff can reach out to you and see if you qualify for a free one-on-one consultation. I don't work with everyone, but because of my specialties in brain and metabolic health, I have a unique way at looking at these problems and helping people to achieve the success that they deserve. During the consultation, we'll use our time to identify what your symptoms are, what your goals are, and if we're a good fit to work together. If it's something that I can help with, I'll let you know exactly what that looks like, and if not, we'll make sure to refer you to the right people. If this sounds like something that might be valuable to you, then I recommend taking that next step and reaching out. I'd love to hear from you. If you'd rather work on some things at home, then make sure to check out my free downloads in the description below, which includes one of the nutritional plans that I use with a lot of my Hashimoto's patients, and the other includes the electrolyte recipe that I use to help people who are following a low-carb or ketogenic way of eating. Of course, if you're interested in any other topics, then you can watch my other videos or testimonials as well. But that's all for right now. Thanks for watching today. I love you guys. I hope that you're doing well. If you're looking for more information, make sure to follow me on Instagram or Facebook, and also like and subscribe this video. My name is Dr. Bodle. I hope that you guys have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next one.